By the time her name was called, most of the room had already stopped paying attention. The auctioneer's voice dragged across the nearly empty hall. Next item, 45 acres, no road access, no registered water source, starting at $100. A few people chuckled. One man didn't bother lowering his voice. That's not land. That's a liability. She sat in the last row, hands folded in her lap, not even holding a bidder's card. She hadn't come to buy anything. Truthfully, she didn't have anything left to buy with. The auctioneer glanced down again, frowning slightly. Assigned through unresolved inheritance. Listed under... He paused, then looked straight at her. Ma'am, that would be you. A ripple of quiet confusion spread through the room. She blinked, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, she said softly, on her voice almost lost in the space. There must be a mistake. The clerk stepped forward, flipping through a thin folder. No, ma'am. The property was never claimed. Your name appears as the final listed heir. A few heads turned now, not with interest, but curiosity edged with amusement. Lucky her, someone muttered. She inherited dirt. She could have stood up, walked out, refused it. No one would have blamed her. The auctioneer cleared his throat. If there are no active bids, the property will transfer directly under her name at minimum value. A pause, a long, quiet pause. Then, almost gently, do you wish to accept, ma'am? She didn't answer right away, because accepting meant responsibility. Taxes, maintenance, a burden she couldn't afford. But refusing meant something else entirely. It meant letting go of the last thing in her life that had chosen her, even if by accident. Behind her, a woman whispered, just loud enough, Poor thing doesn't even know she's being handed a problem. Her fingers tightened slightly. Then she looked up. Yes, she said. The sound of the gavel came down, sharp, final, sold. The room didn't applaud. It laughed. As she stood and made her way toward the exit, a man near the door shook his head, smirking. You just bought yourself 45 acres of nothing. She paused for a moment, hand resting on the door, then quietly replied, more to herself than anyone else. Nothing. Doesn't usually come with a name. She stepped outside into the fading light, the paper in her hand feeling heavier than it should. Behind her, the laughter faded, but the feeling didn't. Yet because somewhere deep inside, she knew one thing she couldn't explain. That land was never meant to be hers. The paper stayed folded in her coat pocket all the way home, not because she was protecting it, but because she didn't know what else to do with it. Her room was exactly as she'd left it that morning. One narrow bed, a small table by the window, a single lamp that flickered before it settled. Everything in it felt temporary, like even the walls weren't sure she belonged there. She set the paper down carefully, as if it might mean something if she treated it that way. 45 acres. She let out a quiet breath. I don't even have $45, she murmured. The truth was, her life hadn't fallen apart all at once. It had happened slowly, so slowly no one noticed. Her husband had died 5 winters ago, on no dramatic goodbye, just a hospital room, a quiet machine, and a silence that never quite left afterward. Her son had stopped calling not long after that. Not out of cruelty, just distance, work, a life that didn't have room for long conversations or difficult emotions. I'll visit soon, he had said the last time. That was over a year ago. She picked up the paper again, smoothing out the crease. Her name sat there in ink that looked too official for something that felt so meaningless. What am I supposed to do with you? She whispered. The question wasn't really about the land. A knock came at the door. Her neighbor, Mrs. Carter, leaned in without waiting. I heard you ended up with that auction mess, she said, half concerned, half amused. You didn't actually take it, did you? She hesitated, then nodded. Mrs. Aunt Carter let out a short laugh. Oh, honey, that kind of land will drain you dry. No water, no access. Nothing grows out there. She paused, softening just a little. You should sell it before it costs you more than it's worth. Sell it. The word lingered. Her eyes drifted back to the paper. Maybe, she said quietly, but something in her chest resisted the idea, not loudly, not clearly, just enough to make her hesitate. Because for the first time in a long while, something in her life hadn't been taken from her. It had been given, even if no one else could understand why that mattered. She told herself she was only going to look, just once, just enough to confirm what everyone else already believed, that it was nothing, that it wasn't worth holding on to. The bus dropped her off miles away from the marked boundary. From there, she walked. The forest didn't welcome her. It didn't resist her either. It simply stood there, dry, quiet, indifferent. Branches cracked under her steps, the sound too loud against the stillness. So, this is it, she murmured, scanning the land around her. No road, no water, no life. Just acres of silence. She almost laughed, almost turned back. Then she saw it. At first, it was nothing more than a break in the pattern, a narrow stretch where the ground didn't match the rest. The leaves were thinner there, disturbed. She stepped closer, knelt, ran her fingers along the dirt. It wasn't packed the way untouched ground should be. It had been pressed down. Recently, her breath caught slightly. No, she whispered. That's not possible. She stood and followed it. The path was subtle, almost careful in the way it tried not to exist. It curved between the trees, avoiding open space, disappearing just enough to make her doubt it was real. Until she saw the next sign. A footprint, clear enough to recognize, too sharp to be old. Someone had been here, recently. She straightened slowly, her chest tightening, not with fear exactly, but with something heavier. Something that didn't belong in a place like this. This land isn't empty. The words slipped out before she could stop them. The wind moved faintly through the trees, carrying no answer. But the silence had changed. It no longer felt abandoned. It felt occupied. She followed the trail a little farther, her steps more cautious now. Each turn seemed to lead deeper, more deliberate, as if someone had walked this route many times before. Then, without warning, it ended. Not faded. Stopped. Right in front of a patch of ground that looked no different from the rest. She stared at it, unsettled. No, she said under her breath. People don't just disappear. She stepped forward, pressing her foot into the dirt. It gave slightly. Too slightly. As if something beneath it wasn't supposed to be there. Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from recognition. This wasn't random. This wasn't nature. This was hidden. She took a step back, eyes fixed on the spot. For a long moment, she didn't move, because something deep inside her had already understood. Before she had proof. That whatever this land was, it had been waiting, and it had just decided to show her the first sign. She didn't leave, not right away. Most people would have turned back, told themselves it was nothing, that the mind plays tricks when silence stretches too far. But she stayed. Standing over that patch of ground, she whispered, almost testing the truth of it. Someone's been here. The words didn't echo. The forest absorbed them. Slowly, she crouched again, brushing aside the thin layer of leaves. The soil beneath was darker, looser, not disturbed by animals, not shaped by weather, by hands. She pulled back, her breath steady but shallow. This isn't right. Still, she didn't walk away. Instead, she turned back toward the faint trail she had followed. And this time, she didn't just walk it. She studied it. Each step revealed something she hadn't noticed before. A broken branch at shoulder height. too clean to be natural. A strip of bark peeled away, not by time, but by something sharp. A stone slightly out of place, set, not fallen, on markers, deliberate, subtle, hidden in plain sight. This isn't just a path, she said quietly. It's meant to be followed. Her voice steadied as the realization settled in. Someone hadn't just passed through this land. They had mapped it. She moved forward again, slower now, her eyes searching not for what stood out, but for what didn't belong. The trail curved deeper into the forest, tighter, more intentional. The air seemed heavier there, as if the trees themselves were holding something in. Then she saw it. A piece of wood, old, weathered, lying flat against the ground. At first glance, it looked like nothing, just debris. But it was too even, too placed. She stepped closer, her heartbeat rising, not in panic, but in certainty. No one leaves something like this by accident. She reached down and gripped the edge, hesitated, just then pulled. The wood lifted with a dry, resistant sound, revealing a shallow hollow beneath. Inside was a metal box. Small, rusted, sealed. She froze. For a long moment, she didn't touch it, because whatever was inside had been hidden on purpose, and not for a short time. Her fingers hovered over the lid, her voice barely audible now. This land was never empty. Then, slowly, she opened it. The lid opened with a brittle snap. Inside, there was no gold, no cash, no treasure anyone would brag about. Just paper, folded, stacked, preserved far too carefully for something meant to be forgotten. She frowned slightly, lifting the first bundle. This is what they hid? But the moment she unfolded the top sheet, her expression changed. Names, dates, parcel numbers. Not random, not scattered, organized. She flipped to the next page. And then the next. Each one told the same quiet story. Ownership records, signatures, official stamps. Some faded, some sharp. And then she saw it. A name, written clearly at the top of one document, crossed out with a heavy line. Below it, another name had been added. Different handwriting, different ink. Her fingers tightened around the paper. That's not how records work, she whispered. She turned to the last page in the stack, and there, near the bottom, was the final entry. The current owner. She froze, because the name printed there was hers. For a moment, she didn't breathe. That's not possible. The date didn't match any legal transfer she had signed. The document itself wasn't filed in any official system she knew of. It was as if someone had written her into the land, without ever telling her. Why me? She said, the question slipping out before she could stop it. The forest gave no answer, but the papers did. She searched deeper through the box, pulling out older documents, more fragile, more faded. And slowly, a pattern began to form. This land had belonged to someone else. Then it hadn't. Not through sale, not through inheritance, but through replacement. Names erased, names rewritten. Ownership shifted, quietly, repeatedly, until the original name no longer existed anywhere but here. Buried, hidden, protected. Her pulse quickened as the realization settled in. This wasn't lost, she murmured. It was erased. A sudden sound behind her made her turn sharply, just the wind brushing through branches. But it didn't feel like nothing anymore. She looked back down at the documents in her hands. Whoever had hidden these had done it carefully, deliberately, and not for themselves. For someone to find, she said slowly. Her eyes moved again to her name on the final page, a name that didn't belong in this story, a name that shouldn't have been there at all. And yet, it was the only one left. Her voice dropped to a whisper, steadier now, more certain than before. This land wasn't meant to be mine. She closed the box gently, her hands no longer shaking. But whatever truth is buried here. She looked out into the silent forest. It chose me anyway. They didn't come the next day, or the day after. For a while, the land returned to silence, as if it had revealed just enough, and was now waiting to see what she would do with it. She didn't tell anyone about the box, not Mrs. Carter, not the clerk, no one. But she went back, again and again. Each time, she carried the papers with her, reading them beneath the trees, tracing the names, memorizing the changes, trying to understand how something like this could exist, without anyone knowing. Then, one afternoon, she heard it. An engine, low, smooth, out of place. Her body stilled before her mind caught up. No roads led here. She turned slowly. Through the thin break in the trees, she saw them. A black SUV. Too clean for this place, too deliberate. It stopped at the edge of the land, as if whoever was inside already knew exactly where to go. Her grip tightened around the folder in her hands. They found it. Or maybe they had never lost it. The doors opened. Two men stepped out, well-dressed, calm. The kind of calm that doesn't belong in the middle of nowhere. They didn't call out, didn't ask permission. They simply walked toward her. Each step measured, each step certain. She stood her ground. When they were close enough, the taller one offered a small, polite smile. "Ma'am," he said, "we've been hoping to speak with you." Her voice didn't shake. "You found me easily." A brief pause. Then the other man spoke, softer, almost reassuring. "This land can be difficult to locate, unless you already know it's here." That wasn't a denial. It was a warning. She said nothing. The taller man reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, thicker, cleaner, official. "We'd like to make you an offer." He opened it just enough for her to see the number. Her breath caught, not from greed, but from disbelief. It was more money than the land could possibly be worth. "Why?" she asked. A simple question. But neither man answered right away. Instead, the second man stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Because you don't understand what you're standing on." She met his gaze, steady now. "Then explain it to me." Silence. A long one. The first man closed the folder. "We're not here to explain," he said calmly. "We're here to make this easy." The word easy lingered, like something that could disappear if she agreed. She glanced down at the papers in her hands, then back at them. "This land wasn't meant to be mine," she said quietly. The men exchanged a look, just a flicker, but enough. "Exactly," the taller one replied, then softer. "Which is why you should walk away." The forest stood still around them, but something had shifted, because now she understood one thing clearly. They weren't offering money. They were trying to close a door, and whatever was behind it was something they could not afford to let her open. They left without pressing her. No threats, no raised voices, just that quiet, practiced certainty, as if they believed time itself would do the work for them. It didn't. That night, she sat at her small table, the papers spread out beneath the dim lamp. The number they had shown her kept drifting back into her mind, then fading just as quickly. Because it didn't answer the question that mattered. Why? She ran her fingers over the oldest documents again, the ones written in fading ink, edges worn thin with age. And for the first time, she stopped looking at the names and started reading everything else. Notes in the margins, dates that didn't line up, signatures that shifted, slightly, but enough to feel wrong. "This wasn't one change," she whispered. "It happened more than once." She pulled out another sheet, one she had almost overlooked. A letter, unsent. The paper trembled slightly in her hands as she unfolded it. If this is ever found, then they didn't succeed in burying all of it. Her breath slowed. The land was taken, not sold, not given. taken. They changed the records piece by piece, knowing no one would question it if the past disappeared quietly enough. Her eyes moved faster now. If you're reading this, it means you were never supposed to own it. She froze. The room felt smaller, closer, but if it reached you anyway, then something went wrong for them. A soft knock at the door made her flinch. "Mrs. Hayes?" It was Mrs. Carter's voice. "You all right in there? Your light's still on." She folded the letter quickly, her voice steady despite the weight pressing down on her chest. I'm fine. Just couldn't sleep." A pause. "You should rest," Mrs. Carter said gently. "Nothing good comes from thinking too much at night." She almost smiled at that. "Maybe," she replied. But as the footsteps faded away, she looked back down at the letter. Nothing good comes from thinking too much. Unless the truth depends on it. She read the final line again. They will come back for it. Not because of what it is worth, but because of what it proves. Her hands stilled. They already did, she whispered. The realization settled in, deeper than before. This wasn't just land. It was evidence. Proof of something that had been rewritten so completely that only this remained. And her name, somehow, had slipped through the cracks of whatever system had buried it. Not chosen, not planned, but left behind. She leaned back slowly, and her eyes fixed on the papers. "For years, no one saw this," she said under her breath. Then, quieter. Or maybe they chose not to. The silence returned, but it wasn't empty anymore. It carried weight, history, and something else, a decision waiting to be made. Because now she understood the truth they had tried to erase. And once you see something like that, you don't get to pretend you didn't. By morning, the fear had settled into something quieter, not gone, just shaped. She didn't go back to the forest. Instead, she walked into the county records office with the box in her hands. The same place that had barely noticed her before. Now, every step felt heavier. The clerk behind the desk looked up, distracted at first, until she placed the documents down. "I need someone to look at these," she said. He flipped open the top file casually, then stopped. His fingers didn't move for a moment. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice lower now. She met his eyes. "On my land." A pause. A longer one this time. He stood up. "Wait here." Minutes passed. Then he returned, with someone else. Older, sharper, the kind of man who didn't ask questions he didn't already understand. He didn't sit. He didn't introduce himself. He just opened the documents and began reading. The silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled slowly. "These records," he said carefully, "don't match what's on file." "I know," she replied. He looked at her now. Really looked. "Do you understand what you're bringing in?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Yes." That surprised him. "Good. Then you understand this won't stay quiet," he continued. "If this is verified, it could reopen cases, land disputes, possibly more." "That's not my concern," she said. His brow tightened slightly. "Then what is?" She held his gaze. "That it's true." The room felt different after that. Less routine, more dangerous. Within days, calls were made, files reopened, names that hadn't been spoken in years began to surface again. And just as the letter had warned, they came back. This time, not to the forest, to her door. The same two men. But there was no smile now. "You should have taken the offer," the taller one said. She didn't invite them in. "I'm not selling." "You're not selling," he repeated slowly. "You're exposing something you don't understand." Her grip on the door frame tightened slightly. "Then help me understand." A flicker of irritation passed between them. The second man stepped forward. "This doesn't end well for people who get involved in things like this." There it was. Not loud, not direct, but clear enough. She didn't step back. For years, she said quietly. No one said anything. They watched her carefully now. And that's exactly why it worked, she continued, because everyone assumed someone else would speak up. Silence. Heavy. Then the taller man nodded once, almost disappointed. You think this is about justice, he said. She didn't answer, because it wasn't that simple. He turned to leave. It's not, he added. The door closed, and for the first time since this began, she understood the cost. Not money, not land, but something harder to carry. The truth. Once it's seen, doesn't just sit quietly. It demands to be fought for. And whether she was ready or not, that fight had already begun. But by the time the hearings ended, the story was no longer hers alone. It had spread. Through offices, through records, through people who had once been told to forget. Names resurfaced. Claims followed. And the land, 45 acres no one wanted, was suddenly worth more than anyone had imagined. Not just in money, in consequence. She sat across from the attorney, the final documents laid out between them. If you sign here, he said gently, you retain full ownership. Legally, it's yours. Everything checks out. Her eyes moved over the paper, but she didn't reach for the pen. And the others? She asked. He paused. The descendants? He clarified. They have a case, a strong one. But it would take time. Years, maybe. Time. She let the words settle. You could sell now, he continued carefully. Walk away with more than enough. No more hearings, no more pressure. He hesitated, then added, no one would blame you. That was the problem. She believed him. Outside, the world had already decided what this story was supposed to be. A lucky break. A poor woman who stumbled into something valuable. An ending that made sense. She leaned back slightly, her voice quieter now. They laughed when I bought it. The attorney gave a small nod. I imagine they did. They said it was nothing. He didn't respond, because now, it clearly wasn't. She looked down at her hands. I didn't go there looking for money, she said. And I didn't find money. Her eyes lifted again, steady, certain. I found something that was taken. The room went still. The attorney leaned forward slightly. So, what are you saying? She didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about what she was giving up. It was about what she was choosing to hold on to. Finally, she reached for the pen, but instead of signing the ownership line, she turned the document, pushed it gently back toward him. They should have it, she said. A long silence followed. You understand what that means? He asked. She nodded. Yes. No wealth, no safety net, no second chance like this again. But also, no question. The attorney studied her for a moment, then exhaled softly. I'll prepare the transfer. She stood slowly, the weight in her chest, lighter now. Not because the decision was easy, but because it was clear. As she reached the door, his voice stopped her. Why? She turned slightly. After everything, why walk away? She held his gaze. Because it was never mine to keep. And for the first time, that felt like enough. A year passed quietly. No headlines, no celebrations, just time, moving forward the way it always does, whether anyone is watching or not. The land had changed, not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. A narrow road had been cleared, not to build over it, but to reach it. The old boundary lines had been restored, markers placed where names once stood erased, and near the center of the property, where the ground had first given way beneath her feet, there was now a small wooden sign, simple, unpolished, not for attention, for memory. She stood in front of it, hands resting lightly against the edge. A few people were gathered nearby, descendants of the family whose name had nearly disappeared. They spoke quietly among themselves, were some holding copies of the documents that had brought everything back to light. One of them, a younger man, stepped closer. "You're the one who found it," he said. She shook her head gently. "No, it was always there." He hesitated, then asked the question others had asked before, just in different words. "You could have kept it," he said. "No one would have stopped you." She smiled faintly. "That's not the same as it being mine." He studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly, as if understanding something he hadn't expected to. "Still," he added, "you changed everything." She didn't answer right away, because that wasn't how it felt. She hadn't changed anything. She had simply refused to ignore what was already there. After a while, the group drifted away, leaving her alone again with the land. The same land they had laughed about. The same land they had tried to take back quietly. The same land that had once looked like nothing. She stepped forward, her gaze moving across the trees, no longer empty, no longer silent. For the first time, it felt at peace. Behind her, footsteps approached. "Mrs. Hayes?" She turned to see Mrs. Carter, a little out of breath, a little unsure. "I had to see it for myself," she said. "They've been talking about you everywhere." A small smile crossed her face. "About the woman who gave away millions." Mrs. Hayes let out a soft breath. "People like simple stories," she replied. "It helps them make sense of things." Mrs. Carter glanced around the land, then back at her. "And this?" she asked. "Does this make sense to you?" Mrs. Hayes looked out at the sign again, then beyond it. "Yes," she said quietly. "For the first time, it does." There was no applause, no grand recognition, just a quiet understanding that settled deeper than anything she had known before. Because in a life where so much had been taken, slowly, silently, without notice, she had finally held something no one could take from her, not land, not money, but the choice to do what was right, when it would have been easier not to. Mrs. Carter crossed her arms, still half puzzled. "So, what did you actually gain from all this?" Mrs. Hayes didn't look at her. Her eyes stayed on the land, on the place that had once been nothing. Then she answered, softly, but without hesitation. "For the first time in my life." She paused. "I didn't lose anything by letting go." The wind moved gently through the trees. And this time, it didn't feel like silence. It felt like something finally restored.